Hey there, this video is to go through the various macros in the Snap and Handy Macros asset that's available in the marketplace. I'm just going to go through each one, just kind of a general usage example. Most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but if there's a few that you're not quite sure of, just check out this video and skip to the one that you want to see what it does. So once you've added it to your project, you should actually get a snap-in folder in the top left here. And if you go into that under the components, you'll see the Handy Macros. And we can see we got our list here. There's some simple instructions here. I'm going to go through what each of these things do. Okay, so the print string one is pretty simple. It's just a print string. It just makes things a little easier and quicker to print more details about something that you're interested in. And I'm going to say every time I jump, I'm going to print something. So we just type SIHM print. So here I'm just going to put self, so this will tell me which actor, which blueprint is actually the one producing the error, because when you have 100 different classes or 100 different blueprints or actors in your level and they're all printing things, there might be something that comes up that catches your eye, but you don't know which one printed it, so this will tell you which actor actually printed it. Maybe you can put an optional error in here too. This is your print string, so we can say jump success. And this is on the event graph under jump, so I'm just going to put in here event graph jump, and how long you want to display the message for. So I'm just going to leave that to the default of 7 seconds, and we'll hit save, play. You can see it says third person character, jump success, check function or macro called event graph jump, and that tells me exactly where I need to go to see that error message. So it's just a little bit more helpful than the default print string. List, we have our loops, so we'll go through these. The is valid loop, basically it's kind of like a while loop or a wait. It checks a bool to see if it's valid and only lets the thread continue if that bool is valid. So we have our print string here and it's happening every time I hit jump. But if I want it to happen when I land, for example, so I could do something like jump ended and take it off there. So what I could do here is I could go character movement is falling, and that gives me a bool here, and if falling is true, that means I'm in the air. So I'm just going to say whenever that is false, I want it to print this string. So basically I just want it to keep checking and tell me when is falling is false. Because if I don't keep checking and I run this, it's only going to check it once. So if I just did this, if it is falling is false, which means I'm on the ground, print that. It'll never print because it only checks it the one time, so it never checks it again. It only checks it while I'm already in the air, and then once it failed, you can see it'll always be true because I'm in the air when it. What we want to do is we want to check that every millisecond, every frame, every something until it returns true. And that's what the is valid loop is. So if we do SIHM is valid and put that, you can get rid of the branch. We just go right into go. And we're going to say when that becomes true, so is falling is false, which means I've landed on the ground. Once that's true, then we're going to print this, jump ended. Okay, and we can delay the first check, and that'll delay it by this interval here. So if we're checking every 0.2 seconds right now, if I do that, it'll run into here, but it's not going to check right away. And that's helpful if there's something that you just set to false right here, and you want to make sure that it doesn't register as true immediately within the first frame or something like that. You can delay it by 0.1 second, so it waits for that to be set to false, and then it'll start checking it. So that's just up to you. It doesn't matter. Either way, the first interval check is going to be 0.2 after that. And the timeout here is 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds of trying, if it doesn't work, it's going to time out. And you can do something with that logic if you want. 0 is no timeout, so just be careful with that because it will run forever if the rule never changes. Okay, so we're going to say check it every 0.2 seconds, and then once you're done, go ahead and print that string. So let's see if that works. So it looks might jump, and I land. Jump, land. And just to show that's not timed or anything, it'll wait as long as it takes for me to land on the ground. So jump, land. And the one in the middle here, under the is valid, this will run every single time the loop is not valid. So if you want to do something in the meantime, for example, this is going to print jump ended. I can also pipe that into there and say, still jumping. What'll happen there is now this particular example where the character is falling or is in the air, there's actually a macro for that too. Anyways, if you want to do just that specific function, there's the handy macro character is falling loop. So if you just pipe that into there, put your character into there, you can say once they landed, never landed. Yeah, so that's just in particular if you wanted to find out if your character is falling. Okay, but it doesn't give you the ability to check each fail to do something, and it also doesn't have a timeout. So if the character doesn't hit the ground after 30 seconds, then it'll go to never. And you can go in there and you can modify that if you want. Okay, so that takes care of the is falling loop as well. But the is valid loop can be used for anything that has a bool. It's helpful if one event happens and you want to keep checking after that event happens. So it's not something that's going to be looped over here. You press the button once, and now I want to keep checking. Okay, so next up we have a for each loop with a delay and break. So these are all very much related to each other. So we'll look at the delay for each loop, just a standard one here. It's like your regular for each loop where you put something in here and then it's going to go through each one, and then once it's finished, ta-da, it's done. The for each loop with delay, it's very similar, except before it does each loop body, it's going to delay by whatever you put here. Pretty self-explanatory. I'll do a quick example on why you might want to use that. So to demonstrate the functionality of the for each loop with delay, I'm actually going to show one of my other assets, which is the Smart Select box. And in this particular one, what we end up doing here is to put all the red soldiers or bots into the red box, put all the blue ones into the blue box, and then put all the remaining ones into the green box. The way I'm using the random delay box is, in order to get them into the boxes here, you have to bring them over to this launch pad, and it launches them into the box. Now, if they all just kind of scrambled onto that launch pad together, they'd all just get launched through the air together. It's smacking into each other. Nobody would go anywhere because there's just so much collision going on that it all just gets stuck right here and fall on the ground. So instead, what happens is as they overlap the box, they're added to an array like this. And then every 1 second, we run this here, and what it does is it grabs that array, and every 0.2 seconds it launches the character, as opposed to immediately launching them all at the same time. So I'll just demonstrate how that works. Okay, so we need to get 6 of the blue guys into there, so just gonna select the blue guys. Now if I threw them all in there at once, normally they just all launch into each other and fall around, but now there's a delay, and this is how the delay works. So you can see they're all getting in there at the same time, but it's delaying each launch. Yeah, so if we just didn't have that in there, what we'd end up doing is this. We would just take the on begin overlap and just do it for each one as they walked in. So if we have no delay there, no random, or if we have no delay there, they all just launch at the same time and fall into each other. Okay, so that's why it's good to be able to control that if you want to. Okay, so the for each loop delay with random and break. So a break is just the same thing as what we're just looking at there. It's just it has a delay. So same thing, it'll delay each iteration, but you can also break the loop whenever you want to. So for each loop random, this is exactly the same as your standard for each loop. The only difference is it's going to pick a random element from the array. So this is useful if you have an array of items and you want to iterate through them in a random order, not necessarily from the list that they're added in. So you can use this to do that. It'll still go through each item. It won't go through more or less, but it'll pick random each time it goes through. Delay, so exactly the same thing as this one. It'll just pick them in a random order. It's also the same as this one. It'll just pick them in a random order, but you can add a delay. As the final one that gets added there is the same thing again, but you can also break the loop. If you wanted to just, if you had an array full of items and you just wanted to choose a random one, then there's a different macro for that, which is just get random from array. So you put your array in there, and it's going to give you the random index. Change this to characters, and let's say dead characters. So let's just say we're tracking an array of dead characters. If we wanted to find a random dead character and bring them back to life because somebody got a special item and it brings a random character back to life, just put that in there, and then it's going to give you the random index. And you just go get, and there you go. You just got a random one from that array. One of the popular things you might want to do with this, the for each loop with random, I'll actually demonstrate that in one of my other assets, which is the ready game modes. When you have a game where you have a whole bunch of player starts and you want to randomize where those players start at, that's when you'd probably want to use something like that. So like any game, if you have a team that's spawning in the team zone, team 1 spawns here, generally what's going to happen is you're going to loop through all your spawn points, and the first player is going to get the first spawn point, second player is going to get second spawn point, third player, and so on and so on and so on. Nothing wrong with that, except it's the same every time. So if you're the first player, then you're always going to spawn in the same spot for each loop with random. So it's going to grab a random spawn point from all of the spawn points, right? So I'm getting all actors of the spawn point class, put it in there, and then every time a player spawns in, it's actually going to find a random one if it's not already used. If it matches their team and all that kind of stuff, you do all those checks after, but that's a good use of that. Next thing on the list is just a find here. So the one that's in here right now that I've been using for certain games is just a find scene component. So I'll bring that in here to show you what that looks like. So we can put any actor in here. If I put myself in there, I'm a third-person character, and all my scene components are right here. All right, so I have capsule, arrow, mesh, camera, follow camera, or camera boom and follow camera, and character movement. So this will let me, without really knowing what they have in here, it gives me a few options to search for something. If I was to overlap an item or an actor, any other actor, doesn't matter what it is, like a turret or something, I could get the camera component of that other actor, right? If I overlapped another player, I could get the camera component of that other player and then call some kind of some kind of action on that, have his camera point to me so we know that it's overlapped him or something like that. You can do whatever you want, but the whole point is that this is universal, that you can quickly find any scene component of an actor from anywhere. And optionally, you can say, if you have custom items on here, so if I say for this particular third-person character, the follow camera always has a tag of player camera, I can put that in there and make sure that I'm finding the right player camera. So the next thing we're going to look at is the arrays. And we have specific int arrays and specific float arrays. Float and the ints are the same, just one's for integer, one's for float. We have sort array, and this will just sort the array from low to high. So you do something like this. Okay, so we had a bunch of values there. And then we want to actually sort those out, so you can see they're not in order. Event begin play. I'm going to grab that random array, and then I'm going to do a for each loop. I'm going to use one of our delays, just so we can see it clearly. So every 1 second, it's going to print the value. So this will give us the unordered value, the current value that's here. And then we'll Now we're going to take the same array, we're going to sort it, and we can either do one of two things. We can reset the array with the new sorted value, so the array from that point on is sorted properly, or we could promote to a variable and create a new array. It's a sorted version. I'm just going to use the same one, so I'll overwrite that. And then again, we'll just do this. And we should get our new values. So let's see how that works. You can see in the top left here, it's printing. It's not in the right order. So 15 was first, 6, 3, 3, 3, 1, 0. Now it says it's sorting. So it just sorted from highest to lowest. Okay, so now if we want to do low to high, this time so we can see the sorted one will be a different color. So now we're going low to high. Okay, and that's how sorting works. There's also lowest and highest. Get the lowest item in an array. And we know the lowest item is 0.8. Okay, so you can get the lowest item in an array by using that. Then the one that we look at that's kind of similar to this is HM closest actor, right? So a lot of times you want to say, you know, if I'm overlapping 6 different items, I can put those 6 items here in this array. So say something like dead characters array. I'm overlapping 6 dead characters and I have Phoenix down and I want to resurrect one of them because I'm overlapping all of them right now. I want to find the closest one to me, and that's the one that's going to be one that's going to be resurrected. Then I'll say here's my array of dead characters. I want to check me, how far I am from me, and then this will be the closest one to me. Is valid array, we've used that a few times, so it's pretty straightforward. It's a very simple one, just type is valid array. Same as like any other is valid in the system, but just let you know if your array is valid or not. Get any pesky errors saying accessed 0 from array or whatever, or access none. Is array greater than 1? So again, pretty straightforward. Alright, so is valid means that there's nothing in there. If it's greater than 1, that means there's more than one value in there. Array equals. So this one's pretty cool. So basically if you have like any random integer, right, you can always do the equals equals. You can say is this float equal to this float, right? That's pretty much what this does, but for arrays. So you can do equals equals. The arrays always have to be of the same type. So this is dead characters. And then I can, if I had a different variable called alive characters, and I wanted to check if all my dead characters arrays match my alive characters arrays. So that works for any array. You just have to make sure that the arrays that you're comparing are the same types. So these are both character arrays. So you'd have to have float arrays, integer arrays, whatever, boolean arrays, whatever you have. You just have to make sure that the two arrays are the same type. So merge or add. This one's pretty helpful too. So if you have all your dead characters and your live characters, might not be the best example, but you can do something like this array plus. So same as you would do with like a float. So if you had your whatever random float, you can say this plus this, and now you have a new value of these two combined. That's exactly what this does. So you have your dead characters and your alive characters, and now you have a new array of these two arrays combined. Not something that's native to the system, so I found it pretty helpful when I wanted to add two arrays together and get the entire list. and unique only. If the two arrays contain the same actor, do you want two copies of that in the array, or do you just want one? So if you just want one, then turn unique only on. Go into the maps. There's only a couple here. So is valid and is map greater than. So here's a map. I can just say is valid. That's telling me if my map is valid or not valid. This just tells me if the map is greater than 1, so if it has more than 1 entry in it. So it is valid if it has at least 1 in it, and this tells me if it has more than 1. I'll convert float to decimals. But basically what this does is, like, let's say you have a health float, and you want to represent the health float to your player's UMG or whatever, and when you try to do that, what you're actually going to end up with is something like this. In the display, it's actually going to look something like, if you had 55 health left, it'll be 50.00. So if you only want to display a specific amount of decimals, that's what this does. Is it a whole number check? Surprisingly, this wasn't in the engine by itself, but I found it pretty helpful. A good example of this is also in my ready game modes asset, which is when we're looking at the teams. If we're looking at teams of 2, so let's say we're doing a 2 versus 2 versus 2 versus 2, however many players you want to have in that, 6 players. And we might end up with 5 players. So if we end up with 6 players, we have 3 teams of 2. But if we have 5 players, that means we have 2 teams of 2 and 1 team of 1. Now the problem is if you take 5 and you divide it by 2, you're going to end up with 2.5, right? And 2.5 teams, it makes sense. You have to have a whole number of teams in order to start the game. That's a check that we'd want to do to see if number of players divided by number of teams, does it equal the whole number? If it doesn't, that means we don't have the right amount of players. So convert UV4 to feet and feet to UV4. Pretty standard, so if you were to do something like get distance 2 self and whatever random actor, you're going to end up with this float value in UE4 units, close to centimeters. It's just hard to kind of understand, how many UE4 units is this guy from this box, right? It's kind of hard to figure out what that actually is. A couple hundred, couple thousand, whatever it is. Maybe like 500. It's a lot easier to use measurements that you're used to using. I'm not American, but we do actually use feet here. So you could say this is probably 20-ish feet from the player. You can say UE4 to feet. And now you have something on tick or whatever this is, or on a timer. This is whenever the character is within 20 feet of this box, do something. And again, if you wanted to convert it back to UE4 units so that you have to do something that only UE4 would understand, and it doesn't know that you've done this conversion, because you don't want 20 feet here if it's expecting 500 or whatever that is. You can just convert it back. Odd or even. Right, so is this an odd number or an even number? So that's pretty straightforward. Enum to array. So this is kind of an interesting one because there's kind of a mixed view on whether or not this would ever be needed. So I found this to be very helpful. Basically what ended up happening is I had a couple of scenarios where I wanted to get all of the items in enumerator, make that an array so that I could go through each one. And again, some people will say, well, why wouldn't you just use an array? You have an enum with the list of values, and you still want to go through those values and check each one or something like that, or do something for each amount of those values. A good example would be create an enum. Let's call it country list. Right, so let's create a few countries here. Okay, so we just have a list of locations here, and what we're going to do with this is we can do something like this, enum to string, and we can say print string. Right, so we can do that. Now what's this going to print? Well, the default value of this enum is none, so it's going to print none. So let's just make sure that works. Top left here, none, right? So now if we wanted this to be a different country, we'd have to go in here and change it manually. So let's change it to the United States and hit play. United States, okay, so cool. Let's say I have every country in the world in here. So that's a pretty long list of countries, right? This could be countries, this could be colors, this could be anything, right? You're just using this enum to easily store a list, make it a drop down and selectable. Perfect, great. Now let's say that you want to add this to something else. Like you wanted to actually have a printout on the screen for the player of every country or every color that's available or everything like that. Well, there's no way for you to go through this list now and print all those countries, right? There's no way for you to go through that list and check if that value exists in the enum. That's where the the hang up is. Why can't I go through this? There's a list here. Very clearly it's a list. Why can't I go through each item in this list and see if the value exists, or just print each one? So now if I wanted to print every single country, I would have to actually manually create an array of countries. Like this. Then I'd have to compile it, and then I'd have to go like this. Canada, United States. This becomes pretty boring. And not only does it become really boring, it also means I have to do it for every single actor that I want a country list in, even though I have my master enum. Right, so I have to do all that. And now what happens if I go here and add a new country? For whatever reason, I forgot one or something. Or again, this could be a color list or a direction list, like up, down, left, right, whatever. And you want to add a new value here, right? It could be a list of character types, worker, builder, warrior, whatever. You want to add a new one. Now you have to go to every single actor that you have those listed in and update your array. Not what I'd like to do. That's not very efficient. So instead, what we'd want to do for that is you still want to create your country list array for the enum. hm enum to array. Right, so we grab country list like that. Instead of manually having to add everything to it, we just bring it out here like this and drag it in there. And this is just a requirement, unfortunately, from the engine, is you have to have the amount of entries in the enum. Luckily, we can do that dynamically. So if you just right-click, type entries, and then you just start typing your enum name, so entries country list, you'll get that value right there. Like, instead of just printing the one that it's currently set to, we can actually go through and get the entire list. Right, so there's no output of the array. It's actually going to set this array when you pipe in on the left side real time. So it'll update this array. So right now there's 0 elements in there. You can even check that before we go with another handy macro. We can say countries is valid array. So if it's not valid, we'll print a string saying not valid, and then that's when we're going to go in and make the array. And then once it's done, it should be valid, and proper programming is we should actually check and make sure in case nothing went wrong. So I'll make sure it's valid, and if it's valid, then we'll go print string, and then from here we're going to drag this out and go for each loop with delay. That way we can sort of watch it print out. So enum to string, and we'll print that out every 0.5 seconds is fine. Not valid. There we go. There we go. So now we have a dynamic function here that grabs all of the values of this enum and makes it into an array. That way we can now use this array. So these are just checks. So is a local controller. I just put any controller in there, player controller or just a base controller. Get actor velocity. Okay, so just pipe the actor in there, and then you'll get the forward, back velocity, left and right, up and down. If you're using it for characters, this is what you'd normally use to get the movement of a character, like a player, but you can also use other actors if they're simulating physics as well. Characters falling, we already checked. Distance to floor, so we can do distance to floor, and we also have distance to component. Okay, so similar to what we did up here, which was get closest actor. So is this actor close to these other actors? Let's say you had, this actor here, or if it was a VR, you'd have your hand, right? Your hand is the actor, but you want to see specifically what's close to the palm of the hand. So you could have something like, I'll use an example here, but I'll add an arrow. I'll say check closest point. Okay, and I want that to be, right by the waist or whatever, in the palm of the hand if it's a VR thing. So now we have that check closest point component. All right, and I'd add a similar thing to all of my items. So like a check closest point. So I would say check closest point of me, and then if I was overlapping, I would say if I'm overlapping an actor, I would say get the overlapped component, and there's a more direct check of distance between this and this as opposed to just the center point of the actor, because otherwise it's going to check the root of the actor, which on the character will be the bottom here. But if I want to see what's closest to my hand, then I can just choose my hand, or I can add an arrow and use the arrow. You can also do something like this using the macros. So if you say other actor, say HM find scene component, right, and then you can look for arrow, and then your tags, you can say closest point, or just closest, and it'll check every single component in the player or the actor that it overlapped to see if there's something called closest. If it contains a tag called closest, you can say closest point check, and then if you just added that as a tag here and to your items, and you can narrow that check down. These are pretty self-explanatory. You can just take a look at these. Add tags to a scene component or add tags to an actor. If you want to create an array full of tags, you can just have hm add tags to scene component. So as you mentioned, I just went in here and you saw me add this tag. If you don't want to have to do that, if you had a whole bunch of them, you don't want to sit there and click and add each one, then you can just create an array, or you can even create a struct, so you can just maintain the one thing and just add the struct here. Grab the array of tags and whatever scene component you want to add that to. So we want it to closest point. It'll then just push all those, it doesn't matter how many you have, you can have 10,000 of them. It'll push all those tags into that component. And similarly, there's an add tags actor as well, so you can do it for an actor. I'll black out the camera, so if you want to just fade the camera to black, you can do that. Fade camera in from a color, fade camera out to a color, fade camera in from black, specifically fade camera out from black. For networking, just a handy server travel. You can set the map name, and if you want it to be a listening map name, so you can just do that there, so you don't have to manually type that out each time. So you can get a player's controller by their pawn, or get a player's state by their pawn. So if you're the server, and let's say an actor, like a player just killed another player, and the one that just did the kill, you want to check their player state to see what their score is, to see if you want to end the game. You can player state by pawn. So you want to run this as a server, obviously, but you can get that pawn, and it'll give you what their player state is, and then you can say score or whatever it is that you want to do. Okay, so that's all of them. I'm always working in this, so anything that I find helpful or that's interesting or that I need, I add to this, and I'll push out updates for those. If there's anything that you'd like to see or have, or any kind of things that you can think of that you think might be useful, I'll also add those. Just jump into the Discord channel there and let me know, and I'll see if I can include it in the next update. Also, as always, if you have any issues or if you need any help, just ping me in Discord and I'll help you out there. All right.